Long division. Use long division to simplify the expression 12x squared minus 21x minus 45 divided by the expression 4x plus 5. So before we start doing this with expressions, let's just take a step backward and review how you do long division with numbers. Here's an example. Divide 398 by 5. We just have numbers here. So how would we do this? Notice we have 398 divided by 5, and when you were doing this a long time ago, you would put 398 inside and the 5 would go out here. So we're going to do the same thing. The 12x squared minus 21x minus 45 goes inside here. The thing we're dividing by, in this case 4x plus 5, goes right here. So I want to label this, name these. The thing that we're dividing is called the dividend. So the 398 is the dividend, as is the 12x squared minus 21x minus 45. The term that is in the denominator that we're actually dividing by is called the divisor. So in this example, 5 is your divisor. Okay, so let's start with this example from a long time ago. When you're trying to do this, you say 5 times what? Usually you start with like the first digit. 5 times what gives me 3, or something smaller? Well, nothing. 5 is bigger than 3. So then you extended it and you actually looked at the first and second digit. You say, well, 5 times what is 39? Well, nothing. So 5 times what is close to 39 but smaller? Okay, well then you say, well, 5 times 7 is 35. So you'd multiply the 5 and the 7 and you'd put the answer right there. Okay, so that's what we're going to do over here. We're going to say 4x plus 5 times what gives me all of this, but that's a lot to think about. So we're going to break it down a piece at a time. 4x times what gives me 12x squared? Well, 4 times 3 is 12. So we need a 3x, and I'm going to line it up above the x term, 3x. Okay, and over here you did 7 times 5 and 35. You put the answer, and kind of lined it up under your dividend. So we're going to do the same thing. 3x times this. So we're going to multiply 3x times this. But let's back up a step. That's really 3x times the whole thing, 4x plus 5. So we'll have to distribute, right? So that's what we're going to be very careful about. This is 12x squared plus 15x. So we put 12x squared plus 15x. Okay? And over here, when you were doing this, I'm going to erase these arrows because now they're in my way. So when you were doing this a long time ago, then you would go through and you'd say, well, I'm going to subtract this. You were going to subtract. So then you did 39 minus 35, and you got 4. So we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to subtract. But we have to be careful. We have this expression, and we're subtracting this entire expression. Okay? So it's like we have 12x squared minus 21x minus 45, subtracting the whole expression underneath, not just the first term. Okay, so we have to be really careful when we're subtracting an expression. We really have to distribute, right? We have to distribute that negative sign. What happens when you distribute a negative sign? Well, you're multiplying by a -1, which means you're changing every sign. Okay, so we're going to go through here, and the easiest way to do this is just, I'm going to use red. I'm going to change all the signs of this second expression. Okay, so then I have 12x squared minus 12x squared, those cancel. Then I have negative 21x minus 15x. I'm really going to add the numbers and use the sign they both have, like that. Okay, and then when you were working over here in this problem, the next step you did was you brought the next term down. We put that 8 right there. So we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to bring down this next term, minus 45. And then we're going to do it again, right? When you were working in this problem just with numbers, you said 5 times what gives me 48? Well, nothing. 5 times what gives me a number smaller than 48 but pretty close? Okay, well, 9 times 5 is 45. So then you would multiply by 9. And you would do it again, right? 9 times 5 is 45. Then you go through and you subtract, and you got 3. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just going to continue the process. 4x times what is negative 36x? Negative 9. So then we multiply. Negative 9 times this entire expression. So it's negative 9 times 4x is negative 36x. Then we do negative 9 times a positive 5. We get a negative 45. And then in this case, when we subtract, we get 0. So going back over here when you were doing this in 3rd or 4th, 5th grade, whenever this was, you had a remainder of 3. Okay, so here our remainder is 0. But we don't really write it like that anymore. Okay, you learned a little bit later after you did this that instead of writing R for remainder 3, sometimes you'd write this as 3/5. Okay, but we have no remainder, so this division comes out very nice. So then we would say that 12x squared minus 21x minus 45, if we divide that by 4x plus 5, the answer is 3x minus 9. So I'm just going to kind of color code the pieces for you. Now, if you want to write this as an equation without any fractions, you could multiply by the least common multiple of the denominators, which there's only one denominator, right? I can write this one over 1, but there's only one denominator that's interesting. 4x plus 5. We can rewrite 12x squared minus 21x minus 45. I'm just showing every step, so just needed a little bit more room. I would multiply this by that denominator, so the denominators will cancel, right? But if I do that to the left-hand side, I better also multiply by that on the right-hand side. If you want to put this over 1, you can, but we're going to see those are going to cancel. So you have 4x plus 5 in this denominator and 4x plus 5 in this numerator. So we end up with 12x squared minus 21x minus 45 equals 3x minus 9 times 4x plus 5. Okay, so I'm going to label the pieces again for you. I did this at the beginning. Let's do it again. This part right here is called the dividend. I flipped the order, but I divided by this one. So this one is the divisor. And this piece is called the quotient. And then sometimes you see plus the remainder. Well, in our example, our remainder was 0. Okay, so let's see if we did this right. Let's actually expand this. We actually have a binomial times a binomial, so we can FOIL. So if you FOIL this out, 3x times 4x is 12x squared. That's the first times the first. The outer, we get 3x times a positive 5, so plus 15x. And then we do the inner term. We have negative 9 times 4x. 9 times 4 is 36, so minus 36x. And the last, negative 9 times 5 is negative 45. Then we can combine these middle terms because they both have a single x to the first power. So 12x squared, we have 15x minus 36x. So we're going to do 36 minus 15 and keep the negative sign. So what is that? 21x minus 45. And we get what we started with. So this is where we just check it. Okay, but this is a way to write your answer. And again, you could leave off this 0 part. Okay, hope that makes sense.